Hi, I'm Ben. Welcome back, and welcome to the Read Good Challenge for 2025. This time last year, I was thinking about the reading year ahead, and I decided to put some monthly prompts together just to keep things interesting, spice things up a little bit when deciding what to read next. And so the Read Good Challenge was born. I did make a video about the challenge and I shared it on here, but I didn't expect too much from it. I was very content that I might just be plodding along with these prompts by myself. But I was blown away by how many people joined in with me. I think there were almost 250 people on the Storygraph challenge, which might not seem like a lot to you, but if I were to throw a party and have 250 people come along, I think that would be a pretty hopping party. It has been an absolute delight to hear from people about how much they've enjoyed participating in the challenge, and I have loved seeing people track their progress on Instagram as the year has gone by. So I am delighted to say that the challenge is back for 2025, and in this video I'm going to be sharing the prompts for the year ahead. In preparing the challenge for 2025, I did put out a call for feedback on last year's set of prompts. Thank you to everyone who completed that form. I have looked through every single response and read every single comment. I really appreciate it. And I just wanted to quickly run through some of the ways in which that feedback has influenced this year's set of prompts. In general, people were pretty game for a mixture of new and old prompts. So for this year, there are 6 brand new prompts, and then there are 6 returning prompts, 2 of which I have switched up a little bit just to keep them interesting. I did ask you what your most favourite and least favourite prompts are, and I was surprised at how little consensus there was around this, except for No Paragraph November, which most of you did not like. So don't worry, that one's got the chop. Lots of you were keen for a wildcard prompt, something that you could substitute in for a particularly tricky month. The good news is I have got something like that for you, but stick around until after the prompts and I'll explain how that works. Finally, there were a few comments or requests which were completely fair, but which I am not doing anything about, and I just wanted to explain why that is. So, a few people expressed a desire to have certain months line up with other things going on, either in the book community, like Nonfiction November or Women in Translation Month, or in the wider world, so like reading for Pride Month or Black History Month. That is totally understandable. But not including those things in the challenge is a choice I've made on purpose, and actually I've dialed it back even more in this year's set of prompts. And there are 2 reasons for that. First, if it is just a list of other stuff going on, to me that's not super interesting to put together. You don't really need me for that, you can write that list yourself. Secondly, and more importantly, I would really encourage you to think about minoritized or underrepresented authors for every single prompt and every single month. In fact, I would really like it to be possible to complete this challenge entirely by reading LGBTQ+ authors or by reading only non-fiction picks. I've tried to design the challenge to support that level of flexibility. I am considering doing another video where I could share some themed reading lists for the challenge, so if you did want to do the challenge entirely reading non-fiction, some examples of how you might put that together, or if you wanted to read just classics all year, some suggestions for that too. I think that would be possible for at least 11 out of the 12 prompts. But yeah, if you would like to see that video, do let me know. If you do want to make the prompts go hand in hand with other challenges you're doing or other things going on, by all means do. I think that is possible, but it is not going to be explicitly referenced in the prompts. Right, that is enough introductory babble. I think it's time to get on with sharing the prompts. Let's start at the very beginning. I've heard that's a pretty good place to start, with January, where I can reveal that she's back, because January is once again Annuary, and your challenge is to read a book by an author called Anne, or some variation of that name. I actually didn't realise how many Annes were booked and busy in the literary world until you all started adding more and more and more books to the Storygraph list, and I decided to bring this one back because I think the well is not yet dry. There are so many Annes out there to be read and enjoyed. You may have guessed this one already because I've got some suggestions here just to run through. High on my list is some more Anne Patchett. I read Tom Lake in 2024 and I thought that was fantastic. Annie Proulx, I've got the shipping news, but she's got a number of books you could turn to. I flashed up The Years by Annie Ernaux last year and I didn't get around to it. It wasn't my pick for January 2024, but maybe it will be this year. I want to read more Booker Prize winners, and so Anne Enright's The Gathering is another one that I am keen to get to. Or if you are in the mood for some scary non-fiction, then Annie Jacobson's, I think this was Bailey Gifford, shortlisted Nuclear War is maybe a bit too heavy right now, but maybe something really interesting to turn to. I am also going to slightly extend this prompt, and if you can't find an Anne that you want to read a book by, then read a book with Anne in the title. So one that's on my shelves is Annie John by Jamaica Kincaid. But you could also turn to something like Anne of Green Gables. Moving on to February, and I think prompts where you have to find something on the cover of the book can be quite fun, and that's exactly what February is all about, because February is Flamuary, and you need to read a book with fire on the cover. We're looking for an image of fire, not just the word fire, although if you have both, then that's pretty cool. And I do have some suggestions for you. Bill Clegg's book, Did You Ever Have a Family, is one I don't really hear many people talking about. I think it was nominated for the Booker quite a few years ago. It's not too long a book. It's just a really heartrending family story that starts out with a devastating house fire. I read this many years ago and really enjoyed it. We can go a little bit more impressionist with our images of fire. So Shirley Hazard's The Great Fire. It may not look like that is a fire, but the cover image is Burning of the Houses of Parliament by J.M.W. Turner. Definitely is fire. I haven't read this one. I actually have no idea what it's about, but I know people love Shirley Hazard, a great Australian author. A very short suggestion could be Denise Mina's Three Fires. I read Rizzio by this author last year and really loved it. And almost as soon as I finished that book, I went out and got another of her novellas, but I haven't gotten around to reading it yet. Finally, a recent release that I have been excited about for years, but sat on my bedside for so long that it's covered in dust, because I haven't read it yet, is Long Island Compromise by Taffy Brodesser Akner. And I was covering the fire, but it is just down in the corner there. This is about a man who experiences some trauma and then the repercussions of that many years later. I adored Fleischman Is in Trouble, so I may need to prioritise this one for February. I am so excited to read it. The prompt for March is The Ides of March, and I have to admit this is a very title-first prompt. I had no idea what to do with it originally. Someone in the feedback form suggested this title and I fell in love with it straight away. If you are not familiar with what the Ides of March is, it's a date in the Roman calendar, which is most famous for being the date on which Julius Caesar was murdered. I was chewing on what to do with this title for quite a while, and I thought maybe we could go in the direction of like murder and betrayal and make that a theme for the book you need to pick. But then I realised that the Ides of March represented the 15th of March, and I thought I could do something interesting with the number 15. And so what I'd like you to do is read a book with 15 letters in the title. And we're looking for letters only, so spaces and punctuation marks don't count. In trying to find some suggestions for you, I've actually found it's really fun to just go through your shelves and like count the letters of the titles to try and find books that match. All you need to be able to do is to count to 15. But the good news is that I found some great options. So 3 that were on my shelves were Cloud Cuckoo Land by Anthony Dorr, which I am not going to read for the March prompt because I'm going to read it much sooner than that. It's actually maybe my next book or my next but one book. Very excited for this one. On the Savage Side by Tiffany McDaniel is another one that has 15 letters in the title. Or if you are looking for a non-fiction or memoir pick, then Sophia Sinclair's How to Say Babylon also has 15 letters in the title. But I'm sure there are many more books with 15 letters in their title sitting on your shelves right now waiting to be discovered. In April, we've got one of the returning but slightly tweaked prompts. Last year, you had to read a Women's Prize winner, but a few people told me that they were big fans of the Women's Prize and had read all the winners, so they couldn't really participate unless they did a reread. So this year I'm going to loosen the shackles slightly, and you just have to read a book that has been nominated for the Women's Prize. So either a winner, shortlisted, or longlisted book. All of those count. I've got a few suggestions that I have pulled off my shelves. So one is Build Your House Around My Body by Violet Coopersmith. This, I think, is like a ghost story set across Vietnam and the UK. An option I really loved from a couple of years ago was Lisa Allen Agostini's The Bread the Devil Need. This is set in Trinidad, and it's about a woman who is dealing with abuse and how she overcomes that. Really, really brilliantly written. And another book that I read quite recently by an author that I love is First Love by Gwendolyn Riley. This is the story of a very toxic relationship, but Gwendolyn Riley's character writing is so top-notch, so specific, I would encourage anyone to read her. I will link in the description and in the Storygraph challenge to the Wikipedia page with all the Women's Prize shortlists, I think, are on there, but not the long list. If you're looking for a long listy, you may need to delve into the Women's Prize's own website. Let's move on to May, and the prompt for this month is Déjà Vu. And I think this might be my favourite prompt title of the entire year. I'm very all in on this pun. And déjà vu is when you have that uncanny feeling that you are experiencing something that has already happened before. And as we all know, it is proof that we live in the Matrix. Déjà vu is also about experiencing something again, because I want you to reread a book, perhaps something that you haven't read for many years, maybe something you haven't even read since you were at school, or maybe you'll turn to a book that you think you will get a lot out of on a second reading. There might have been a twist in the book and you think you might be able to spot the clues and crumbs that you didn't get on your first reading. If you really don't fancy rereading a book, I know some people just don't like doing that, that's absolutely fine. What I'd like you to do is to read another book by an author that you've read before. The books that I'm thinking about for this month's prompt include The Safekeep by Yael van der Voden. This is one that I think I could get a lot out of on a second reading. There's lots of hidden things I think I could spot. I also am considering rereading Exit West by Mohsin Hamid, and the reason for this is that this is a book I gave 5 stars, but then I read another book by Hamid and I really didn't like it. I did not like the writing style, and I want to find out if that writing style is in this book as well, and it's me that's changed rather than Mohsin Hamid. Another one I'd be keen to read again and haven't read for many, many years is Kazuo Ishiguro's Never Let Me Go. And then as for an author that I want to read another book by, I do want to read Han Kang's Human Acts. Not only does it seem very relevant given what happened in South Korea recently, but I didn't love The Vegetarian and I want to give Han Kang another go. In June, we've got a returning prompt, and this was actually the most popular prompt in the feedback form. It is Reading Shame Forgiveness Month. This is a chance for you to alleviate some shame in your reading life. Perhaps a book you've always meant to read, one that you started and never ever got around to finishing, or perhaps you've told some porcupines and said that you've read Ulysses, but actually you never did. The other way you can interpret this is to read without shame. Maybe there is a book that you think people will judge you for reading, but it doesn't bloody matter in June. You read that book. I did a video to coincide with Reading Shame Forgiveness Month last year, where I went through a few different flavours of shame and my suggestions for the sorts of books that I might turn to. I will link to that down in the description if you want to have a look at that for inspiration. This year, I think the theme of my reading shame is that I have and continue to acquire so many chunky books and I just end up reaching for the little slim volumes. This year, I want to spend some quality time with some chunksters, and 3 that are high up on my list are The Poisonwood Bible by Barbara Kingsolver. I have only read Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver, but I am told that there is lots more to enjoy in Kingsolver's back catalogue, and this is the next one I'm going to read. A book that came out last year, so 2023, and was on a lot of people's best books of the year was Collected Works by Lydia Sandgren. This, I think, is like a family drama. It's supposed to be quite funny, so I think this could be a really fun read. And one that came out this year, and which I picked up the paperback of because I thought the paperback just looked so much nicer in the UK at least, Wellness by Nathan Hill, which, to be honest, on the surface sounds like it might bore me because it's supposed to go down lots of little sort of divergent lines of thought, but I also hear people absolutely rave about it, so I want to see what the fuss is about. In July, we've got another returning prompt, and that is to read a work in translation. Very easy to know if a book qualifies or not. 2 high up on my list are Karl Ove Knausgaard's The Morning Star. This is the first in what is currently a trilogy, but I think he's got more volumes planned for it. They are all chunksters, but people who love them really love them. And another one I want to read is Pink Slime by Fernanda Trias, not only just because it is gorgeous, but I'm also just really intrigued in the premise and how it's going to deal with like the environment and climate and things like that. Moving on to August, and this is the second of the tweaked prompts from last year. Last year you had to read a Booker nominated book. This year I'm mixing it up and I want you to read a book by a Booker winning author. So 2 things to note. 1, it can be the English language Booker or the international Booker, up to you, that's completely fine. And 2, it does not need to be the book that won them the prize. I think this gives you tons of flexibility because it means you can read some non-fiction as well as some fiction. Two books that I have on my radar are A.S. Byatt's The Children's Book. A.S. Byatt won for Possession, I think, in 1990. I haven't read that either, but I could read that if I wanted. But the one I've got on my shelves is The Children's Book. And another one is Richard Flanagan's The Narrow Road to the Deep North. This is the book that he won the Booker Prize for. But again, I don't have to read the Booker winning book. And another option that I'm really, really interested in that is coming out in paperback early next year is Question 7, which is his kind of hybrid memoir fiction thing that has really challenged genre boundaries. The prompt for September is Sapphire September, and this is because the birthstone for September is sapphire. Now, I don't really go in for all this birthstone, zodiac, tarot, whatever stuff, but it is a good excuse to ask you to read a book with a blue cover. This should be a super easy prompt, and I think a very obvious place you could turn to is literally any Fitzcarraldo, because they are all blue. Well, except the non-fiction ones, those are white. But if you want to give their fiction a go, then you're in luck because every single book is eligible for this prompt. Some other books that you could turn to, though, include Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata or Hannah Kent's Burial Rites, both of which have lovely shades of blue on the cover. But there are going to be tons and tons of blue books out there, so you have plenty of choice. We now move into the final quarter of the year, and October is our final returning prompt, which is Ugtober, to read a book with an ugly cover. I know this one was a little bit divisive, but I thought it was so fun to see other people's interpretation of what an ugly cover means. And I think it's good for us to give some love to the Uggo books on our shelves. Some that I am considering this time around, and I'm sure people are going to tell me, actually, no, those are really pretty. But my ugly books, in my opinion, are A Certain Hunger by Chelsea Summers. And this is egregious for two reasons. One, I have complained about the use of sexy or violent fruit on covers. I think it's just so played out and so boring. But two, this book has a beautiful painting for a cover in the US, so I feel a bit shortchanged by getting this one. I'm also not a very big fan of movie tie-in editions, so this edition of Brooklyn by Colm Tóibín is one that I would say is ugly. I'm not saying any of the people on the front are ugly, I just think the book cover design is ugly. And finally, I do find a lot of older book covers not that visually appealing, but it is interesting to see how trends change and what people consider a good book cover changes over the years. One that I don't think has aged particularly well is Unless by Carol Shields, but I've heard great things about the book, so I'm still very excited to read it. November. Now this was the controversial, most hated prompt from last year, but as I've said, no paragraph November is not back this time around. But I did see that a few people did something interesting with this prompt and tweaked it for themselves to be No Comfort November. And so I see no reason why not to adopt a good idea. So that is your prompt for this month. I want you to read something in November that is outside of your comfort zone. If you are one of the 3 people who told me No Paragraph November was your favourite prompt of the year, then you are free to choose a book without paragraphs again. But for the rest of you who are currently rejoicing, consider this encouragement to think about what you usually read and then take a little step to the left or a big old jump to the right. If you are usually a lit fiction reader, then why not turn to a thriller? Or if you are chained to contemporary books and new releases, then maybe it's time to pick up a classic. Another way you could look at it is to read a book that is thematically outside of what you usually read. Maybe read something that scares you, or a book by someone who you disagree with, because it can be really interesting and mind-expanding to engage with a perspective of someone you completely disagree with. This is quite a personal one, so have a think. The world is your oyster. For me, I do tend to read literary fiction, and I do tend to read quite recent releases, so there's plenty of directions I can go with this one. One is perhaps to read some non-fiction. Say Nothing has been a book that I've been wanting to get to for ages. Patrick Radden Keefe's writing I know I like. I'm really interested in Northern Ireland and the Troubles. I recently read Milkman, and that was a really interesting book. I'd love to learn more about it through this. I also never read poetry, and that's mainly because I don't tend to get on with it, but I should just push myself to read some. I do have a copy of Sylvia Plath's Ariel. This is one I could turn to in November. Or classics is another sort of genre of books that I don't tend to pick up, but I really should read more of them. East of Eden is one that I'd love to get to. We're at our final prompt of the year then, and the prompt for December is Decembros. And for this prompt, I'd like you to read a book about brothers or brotherhood. Basically, I can't walk through a bookshop at the moment without falling over a pile of books about sisters. So I'm keen to give a book and a story about brothers a go. It could be about two brothers and a relationship between brothers, or it could be about a sister talking about her brother. Either of those completely fine. I've got some examples of both for you. One that came out last year was What I'd Rather Not Think About by Henty Postuma. This is about a woman reflecting on her brother's mental health issues and how she deals with some of the not great things that he goes through. Another you could read is Brotherless Night by Vivi Ganeshananthan. This was the winner of the Women's Prize last year. It's a really great, cracking story about a young girl called Sashi and her experience of losing her brothers in one way or another over a number of years in Sri Lanka. Amor Towell's last novel was The Lincoln Highway, and I think this is about two brothers who go on a road trip. And of course, I cannot get through this prompt without mentioning Sally Rooney's Intermezzo, which is another book that has two brothers at its centre. So those are your 12 prompts for the year, but I have not forgotten, I did promise you a wild card. And your wild card this year is called Agatha All Along. And what you are able to do, if you choose so, is to swap any of the prompts for an Agatha Christie. You can do this once. Now, does this wildcard exist just so I can play this clip? Absolutely, yes. But it does exist for another reason. It is a tribute to our dearly missed friend on Booktube, Alice from Alice and the Giant Bookshelf. She was a huge Agatha Christie buff, and I love the idea of her just waiting in the wings if you are struggling, clutching onto an Agatha Christie book that she just presses into your hands to save the day. If you are participating in the challenges in the Storygraph, this prompt will be added as a bonus prompt, so you don't need to do it in order to complete the challenge. However, the way bonus prompts work is that they're kind of a separate counter to the main prompt. So what you'll need to do is add your Agatha Christie both to the bonus prompt and to the prompt that you are skipping. The benefits of this is that if you are looking through a prompt of like Booker winners and you see an Agatha Christie there, don't worry, that person hasn't lost their mind. They are just skipping that month. And if you do this, it means by the end of the year, your Storygraph challenge tracker will look like this and not like this. I hope at least some of you out there are as excited for the Read Good Challenge for 2025 as I am. If you think there are any friends who would really enjoy it, please do share this with them as well. Down in the description, I will link to the Storygraph page as well as some templates for Instagram stories or a printout if you'd prefer to print something off and track it like that. Also, if you have a Booktube channel and you want to put together a TBR and do a video on what you intend to read, please do tag me because I would love to watch it. Gretchen from Made You Book did that last year and it was just the most delightful surprise. Please do let me know in the comments which prompts you are most excited for, or if any ideas have immediately sprung into your mind. If you did enjoy this video, please do hit like, and if you'd like to see more from me, then hit subscribe. But until next time, toodles.